Oh, are we in 2019? We're in 2019, right? 2019.
No.
Check it, time. So we're into last year right now, which is, I think, just Sharon and Joe. So, Bill, hang out. We're coming back to you. No, you're 2020, Lou. You're 2020. You're coming back in 2020. Don't worry.
This
That
is
was the one where I kind of. That's the one where I kind of bumped you, and because I wanted to spend more time. You know what? Bring Lou in. Go ahead and bring Lou in. We'll talk to her for both. No, we're just going to bring you in for both. We're just going to bring you in and let you stay through the end. And why? Because I love this book. That is why. That is why. So, 2019 had us release 2.5 books. We'll say 2.5 because we were right at the very end of 2019 and we were ready to go. And we just put the year as like the first week of 2020, which is what it is, right? But let's talk first because I want to talk about Exile's Gift, because Exile's Gift is probably, of the books that we released I'll say it's the most anticipated book so far of the books that we have released. So Sharon, talk a little bit about what it was like to get to that finish line and kind of like what led up to that and some of the emotions that led up to that.
It was painful. So, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, when you're writing and you're writing for yourself and you're writing for that target reader and you don't have fans yet, like I was with Healer's Legacy and with Mirabella and even somewhat with Nellick Stones, I was writing joyfully and I was writing for, to tell the best story, of course, as always. But when you start to have fans, they start to get inside your head a little bit. And when I wrote Matriarchs was difficult because it was a second act book and because I wasn't sure where I was headed. And I let the idea of what do people want rather than what story do I need to tell kind of get inside my head. And I had even more trouble with that during Exiles because Matriarchs did get a good reception. People were waiting for Exiles. They were waiting, some of them for a long time for it. And Exiles was very, very difficult for me to write. Third books are hard. I know it took Joe some time to get his where he wanted it. I understand that now more than I ever did before, how difficult it is to not just write series, but to close out a series, to close out a world, to finish a story in a way that's satisfying for the writer as well as the characters and the reader. As you know, it's a very difficult thing. I think that I succeeded pretty well with Exiles. I know the writing is the strongest writing I had done up until that time because future Sharon is always a better writer than past Sharon. Future Sharon is always a better editor than past Sharon. So in that respect, I know at the time it was the best book I could produce. And I'm just grateful that I have so many fans that have received it well, because that was a scary thing, closing out a series.
Totally. I having been on that journey as a passenger, I can totally empathize with that sentiment. But I want to pivot now. I want to talk about War Golem. Because War Golem to me, and I kind of say this and Joe's kind of like, oh yeah, I suppose. War Golem to me is almost like a statement on Gamergate and the attitudes that are prevalent within some of the participants in the gaming community. And I think that War Golem is a fantastic sort of journey, if you will, that subtly goes there. So Talk a little bit about the background of that, Joe, and kind of how that came to be.
It actually started off as just kind of like it was this there was this website called Protagonize, and it allowed people to create serialized work. And I didn't take notes for this book. I just started writing just to see where it would go. And I purposely tried to be funny. Which I mean, I don't try to write comedy. But the main character is just really easy to write because he's basically a gamer. He's like a teenage griefer who the only joy he gets is in making other people miserable. So I did the first 8 chapters on that website, and it had a really good reception. But then I don't know if I got distracted with a video game or something. I stopped working on it, and then I came back to it like a year later, and decided that I was going to actually finish it. And so I picked up in like chapter 8, and that's when I decided I needed to take notes, because I need to, figure out where am I going with this book? How am I going to wrap it up and things like that.
It's just kind of one of those, it's one of those kind of statement books without being a statement, kind of. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I think that it does a good job of showing how when we're disconnected from the reality of what we're doing, it changes our perspective and our attitude. And then all of a sudden, when we're snapped into the fact that, hey, this is real, we're like, oh, wait a minute, this is now real. I can't treat it the same way that I treated it before.
Yeah. Like the main character at some point starts to care.
Yeah.
It kind of shows, like, in a way, like when he first gets there, he's in this golem body, and it's almost like being anonymous on the internet. He's kind of disconnected from everybody else. But then, he's got stakes, and he starts to care about the people there. And
yeah, I think it's a really good, I just think it's one of those kind of sneaks in under the radar as kind of being more of a statement than people think it is.
It's really subtle social commentary in that sense. Yeah.
Which leads me right into the book that we squeaked out there right at the very end of 19 and the beginning of 20, which I think it was an important book in a lot of ways, because I think that it represents a lot of things that you don't. It's a deeper read than what it is on the surface. And so, Louise, tell us a little bit about how the experiment known as Rosemary Hernandez-Williamson came to be, and kind of, how deep is that when you get into it?
Well, I had a few problems to consider, but the basic story came to me, or at least 3/4 of the story came to me. And unlike when I write poetry, I felt like I needed to know the direction I was driving in. With poetry, I'm usually flying by the seat of my pants. But with a story, I need to have direction for some reason. And I had a pretty solid direction, in that it got fleshed out and then morphed and evolved. And, I have a lot of iterations, but the character was mostly there. The driving idea, first person born on a spaceship. So it gives me a couple of outs. As an author, I can create a closed world. I put it almost 100 years in the future, so I could put through a little bit of a wish list, set up the next book, which will be back on Earth. But so I got to, some of the cultural stuff that I might need to figure out later in the future, I didn't have to deal with because I had a closed environment, and it helped me with that kind of limitation. But then I could just have the hard cold universe be the villain. There's no villain, just should have things go wrong, and so I had much of the arc of the story in my head when I sat down to write it, and it came out pretty quickly. I had the character firmly in my head. She's a little bit count. She's a little straight. And but the most fun was the side characters, because I kind of, some of them I had the character, but some of them I just kind of had a vague idea, and those characters are sort of blossom as they walked around the universe. I had a little map, I had a this, and like, so I had a little universe that I had all mapped out. I definitely wanted to do science fiction because I read a lot of fantasy, but I mostly read, my love is science fiction. So I wanted to space. So yeah, it was a great deal of fun writing it. I like to say that, reading a book, how wonderful that is. This is like that times 100. You're just totally immersed in this world, and I loved it. Does that?
So who is? And I don't know. And this might be an open question for the three of you, or the four of you, including. But when you're writing these stories, do you know the person that's going to pick up this book and read it? Like, do you envision who that person is?
I kind of did. I wrote it for a little bit younger than my own kids, because often kids will read the population just ahead of them. And so I was super familiar with the way 7th and 8th and 9th graders were thinking. And that really kind of helped drive, like, I know that they're going to have like unicorns farting muffins. I know they're going to do like the fart, the stud, the jokes, like it's all kind of developmentally there. So I had it kind of in front of me there. Right now they're 18 and 21, but they were, yeah. So. Yeah, when I started, I just needed to have them be like ahead of the person, the reader, kind of. But I also thought about this a lot. Except for one word, I didn't edit the vocabulary whatsoever. Like, I didn't try to dumb it down. If my mother would have said detrimental to me when I was 9, reader's gonna get the word detrimental. I mean, like, so I didn't want to pull that at all, because I know that is part of what's, I did pull few punches on a few things because of age, but it wasn't vocabulary, it wasn't character, it was anything like that. So.
Yep.
I don't target people. I write what I want to read. So I guess I'm my own target audience.
And that, I would say that's typically true for me too, because I write because of the voices in my head. So it's, I've got to get the story out. It's not until I'm editing that I really understand what the commercial target is. And then it still only informs me to a small extent. Mostly I just know what the age range is and where it would be positioned in the market. But that's because I'm pretty well embedded in that world, between my volunteer work and my book coaching and my editing work. I'm pretty well embedded in especially the kids lit world. And I'm also an avid reader. I did my inventory on Goodreads to date, and I have read 80 books this year, and I'm on target to beat my all-time record of 81 on Goodreads. So I am that reader. And I read deeply and broadly and very eclectically and very voraciously, apparently.
Cool. Clint, what about you? You bring a little bit of a different perspective to this. When you create a poem, do you know who's going to be the reader of that poem, or do you know who you think is going to be the most excited to experience it?
Not really. I mean, to a certain extent, I write for me, in the sense of what I find is going to be funny, and I hope the audience, whether they're reading it or whether they're seeing me perform it, I hope they come along with me live to do it. Okay. To I don't know. There's seldom do I write. Which sounds selfish in a sense, because writing for me is kind of an exercise in self-aggrandizement, if you will, like, oh my God, I'm the best audience for this and blah, blah, blah. But no, I kind of write to show people who I am, and hopefully that's what they experience.
All right. So at this point, we're gonna shift chairs. So Marcus is gonna bump us around for our 2020 peeps. So Lou, sit tight. You'll stay with us for 2020, and Jen's gonna give something away.
Wait,
You got Jen.
no. I don't know. I'm gonna give away. You know what? Let's give him everything. Let's give him a future words. Let's give him like a taste of everything.
Okay. I think
I'm gonna try to find a person to give it to.
So Scott made a very good comment. He writes what he wants to read and trusts that like the last thing. Chloe, you want to finish that for me?
What?
What, you want to finish Scott's comment? Scott just made a comment.
Oh, sorry, I did see it in the Q&A. Hang on.
Check the chat. I think you made it in the chat.
Oh yeah. What Scott writes is that he writes what he wants to read and trusts that people who want to see it too, which I think